I feel like we're entering a new era, an era of creativity, and in some ways we feel like we're those kind of monkeys finding a new tool and being all impressed about the possibilities and a bit afraid also of what we're seeing. So I'm going to dive into some usage of specifically ChatGPT, but the concepts will apply to other AI tools that we might use. But before I dive into that, Phil asked me to share a little funny side or interesting tidbits about my life. 6 months ago, we sold our house, we sold everything we owned, and we left Quebec in Canada with our car, our travel trailer, and of course, our dog. And we drove all the way across Canada, so about 4,000 kilometers to relocate to a town called Canmore, which is in the Canadian Rockies. So I'm hiking, and I missed the ski season for this time, but next year I'm going to go skiing again, and of course do a lot of hiking. It's just a wonderful place. So that's a little tidbit about me, but let's go right into the topic. So if you've used ChatGPT already to do some tests, maybe just use the reaction at the bottom of the screen and just do a thumbs up. I will see that in the participants. Yeah, I see. Okay, just a few of you. Yeah, okay. So I see that coming in. So it looks like, sorry, yeah, a good amount of people. I would say 20-30% of the people on the attending. So that's good. I would really encourage you, really want you to go and try it. You will see the examples that I'm going to share with you. So what I don't want to go too far into what is ChatGPT. You've probably heard that before. It's a generative pre-trained transformer. It's deep learning. It was trained on a ton of data that was publicly available on the internet. They say for ChatGPT 3 or GPT 3.5, it was 570 gigabytes of publicly accessible data. GPT-4, they didn't disclose the amount of training data. There were some rumors, but they never actually said how much data it was trained on. That's not really what's important in the perspective of what I'm going to show you. You will see the quality of the answers is pretty amazing. It's the largest model, so that's why we hear a lot about GPT or ChatGPT, because it's the largest one. It's being reused in a ton of different other products. And the best analogy we can make, even if it's not a perfect one, a human brain has about 100 billion connectors, neurons connector. And in the latest version, in fact, in GPT 3.5, there's 175 billion. So there is more connections between the data than in a human brain. And GPT-4 is even more powerful than that. There's no official number that has been disclosed. So how does it work exactly? Well, you've probably heard the term prompt engineering. No, you will not earn $300,000 for prompting ChatGPT. That we heard that. Some people were saying, oh, you can make a ton of money if you know how to prompt it. People were talking about $300,000 US. That's a lot of money. I don't think that's going to happen. Yes, we do need to know how to prompt the tool correctly, but I don't think that's going to make you rich. How does it work behind the scene? Well, you have a ton of training data, pretty random, all kinds of different attributes about the data and so on. Classification that needs to happen. So similarities, what is the relation between certain terms and stuff like that. And eventually, the concept is pretty simple when you think of it. What ChatGPT will answer is based on the likelihood of the next term or the next thing that will happen. So it creates a structure. And based on that, you will see that the answers are pretty amazing in terms of the quality. So I didn't want to go too far into that. What I want to highlight is there's no magic trick. You've seen on LinkedIn and in other places, tons and tons of posts about, oh, the 12, amazing prompts that you can use for this and that, or the 42 other prompts for something else. It's a little bit like the magic KPIs for e-commerce. Yeah, there's no magic. There's just you need to understand the tool. You need to develop your own skills. One interesting tidbit is you can actually go in ChatGPT and ask it about the meaning of number 42 and look at the answer. It's going to be pretty fun. So most of the time when people start with ChatGPT, they tend to use it for very simple tasks. Correct, improve a text, translate. I was using Google Translate or DeepL to do translation. I'm just using ChatGPT now. On a daily basis, I keep a tab open in my browser, always on ChatGPT, and I constantly go back to it either to improve some text. The amazing thing is that, be it French or English, French is my mother tongue, the way it works, it actually can correct the text, but it can also explain what are the grammatical rules, why the text needs to be fixed. Summarizing, of course, improving writing in the style of, or writing for a specific audience. So I'm teaching, so I can take a text and I can say, explain it for students enrolled in a marketing class for an MBA, for example. And it will use a language that is more appropriate for that audience. Or I could say, simplify it for, explain what are cookies for my grandmother, for example. GPT-4 can use 25,000 words as input. So you can give it a text and say, oh, improve it, translate it, rephrase, and so on. And it can output up to 25,000 words at a time. So if you have a long conversation, it will work, but it will be limited to those number of words. A little test that has been done to prove how powerful it can be. If you use the corrector in Microsoft Word, it's a test actually that was done by someone who wrote a text that had a lot of very complex grammatical rules in English. And Word found only 15% of those issues. Sorry, I have a cold. And you see that depending on the tool you use, and ChatGPT was the one that was able to not only find the problems in the text, but also explain them, which is also pretty amazing. So that's how people use it initially. One way I present it is, it's like you're a colleague that you can work with, and you can ask as many questions as you want. Even if you think they are stupid questions, just go ahead and try it. And what I've seen with my students, what I've seen is sometimes they will send me an email asking, oh, can you explain? I didn't understand this and that. And what I've started doing is, in the past, I could refer them to, oh, go into this document section, this and that. And now what I do is I test it. I bring it into ChatGPT. I take their question exactly as they stated it. And I look at the GPT answer, and most of the time it's much better, because if the student didn't understand based on the available information in the course, it's not very useful to simply tell them, go there and read that again, because they didn't understand the first time. So if we come with a different explanation, the likelihood of understanding is much greater. Of course, I vet those answers from ChatGPT to make sure that they are correct. So the impact on productivity, there is very little research that has been done in terms of looking at the impact of using ChatGPT in the workplace. One test that was done was a split test with a bunch of people who have higher education degrees. They split A/B, and for a given set of tasks, typically the brainstorming was 25% of the time. It took 25% of the time to do that. The rough drafting took the chunk of the time, which is about 50%. And then editing and finalizing and improving the delivery was 25% of the time without using ChatGPT. So when they use ChatGPT for the same amount of time, or we could say the same effort, 20% was spent on brainstorming, 30% was spent on drafting, which would be like a basic document, an average document, but 40% of the time was now spent on improving the document itself, improving the delivery, the end result. And in many cases, like about a quarter of the time, they actually replaced their own answer with the one that was given by ChatGPT because they evaluated that it wasn't what they thought initially. Or 25% of them actually modified their answer to include some elements of what ChatGPT said. I think it's very interesting because it means that for the same amount of time, you have a choice. Either you make the task faster for the same level of quality, or you take the time that you save and you produce better results. And because I accept ChatGPT in my classes, what I've done also, and I told them, my expectations are going to be higher. So what we've seen yesterday, I was seeing on LinkedIn, there's an agency that has started using ChatGPT to cut costs. I don't think it's the right way to see that. It shouldn't be to cut costs. It should be to improve the end result. So don't try to simply cut the corners. So now let's look at some example. Easy ones, you can ask for examples, JavaScript code, Python, R, HTML, Regex, SQL requests, name it. Very, very easy. Basic prompt, based on the given link, split it out into an Excel, and it will give me the formula to do it. It won't always be perfect. It's getting much better, but generally it's really close to what you want. Generating code is really good also. In fact, for code, there is GitHub Copilot. So what we'll see is a lot of vertical applications of artificial intelligence and generative AI. So in that case, you can go on GitHub Copilot and you can ask it to generate code, all kinds of questions. So instead of just going on GitHub and finding someone's code and doing a copy and paste and so on, now you can be creative and you can create your own code for your own needs. So it's very powerful. The quality of the code is amazing. But what's interesting also is you can actually provide it some code and ask for an explanation. So those I would qualify those as still a basic use of ChatGPT or generative AI in general. For those who are using ChatGPT, if you subscribe and you're a Plus user, you have access to plugins, which makes ChatGPT very, very powerful because it's like extensions that you can use. I'm looking forward to have access to the code interpreter. Sadly, I don't have it, but I have access to the browser and other third-party plugins. So maybe not, if you go there, maybe you won't have access, but eventually you're going to be able directly in ChatGPT to give it code, give it a CSV file, give it some data, and ask questions about it afterward. So that's going to be another kind of a general use of ChatGPT for which becomes closer to what we do as analysts and marketers. Oh no! Of course, Murphy's Law. So I'm going to go directly into my ChatGPT. Always have a plan B. Okay, so I'm going to show you some examples and make that bigger so you can see it. Okay, so let's dive into some more examples really related to what we do as analysts and marketers. So a while ago, a student asked me an explanation about statistical significance. So I just took some numbers that I had available and I asked for an explanation. So that's exactly the prompt that I asked for. And now you see, and the key here is explain step by step for digital marketers. So I want a level, an explanation that should be understandable for marketers. It would be different if I'm saying, explain it for statisticians, for example. Maybe we'll go deeper. So look, it first looks at data, then it gives me an explanation of what is a z-test, and then it goes on with an explanation. But I was not quite satisfied with the explanation. So I asked it to show me the formula and a table summary of those calculations. So here you go, you've got the formula with the explanation of each of the elements, and then a summary table, and of course an explanation. And it will generally conclude with, it's very polite. It will conclude with a summary or a caveat, or I hope this has been useful for you, and so on and so on. So the key here was explain step by step, and sorry about that. I don't know why it's, of course, it's Murphy's law, and with all the amount of AI, there's always there's always things going on. So I'm going to just jump back where I was right here. Okay. Okay, so it looks like all of them didn't go through. So I'm going to continue with the other example. You can use it to explain a concept. So that prompt is interesting because it's a generic prompt that you can reuse all the time. So here, I'm saying I want you to generate a clear, accurate example for students. So I'm telling it what I want it to do, for whom I want it to do, and I want you to ask me two questions. What is the concept that I want to explain, and who's the audience for whom I want to explain it? And then I want to provide clear and multiple paragraphs explanation of the concept using specific example and analogies, so that the students can understand in different ways. So ChatGPT will say, okay, all right, go ahead. I'm going to ask you two questions. What is the concept and what is the audience? So I want to explain first-party data, and I want to explain it for a director of marketing. And then it goes on and explain what is first-party data, and gives me three different analogies that I can use. It makes a huge difference in terms of understanding concepts. So that's another one that I think is pretty interesting. A generic prompt that you can reuse all the time. Next one. We all know Tim Wilson. He presented at Supermetrics about time series analysis. So now I'm telling it, I'm using plugins, and one of them is Wolfram Alpha, which is more suited for statistics, mathematics, and things like that. So now I'm telling it to use a specific plugin to explain a concept with some techniques, caveats, and in the style of Tim Wilson presenting at Super Week for an audience of digital marketer and analytics professional. Add visuals also in the style of Edward Tufte. So it went ahead, it gave me some examples. If Tim Wilson was looking at that, maybe he would say, oh, no, that's not quite it, or is it close enough? I don't know. But the explanation is actually pretty interesting. But you notice that it didn't actually give me the visual part of it. So I can iterate. I can just go back and ask again. Well, visualize the concept. Show me a time series. So here's a visualization of a random time series, and then it can go on and explain again the concept of the time series. And I came back and asked again, what would Tim Wilson say in his presentation? And I have a script for pretending to be Tim Wilson and making a great explanation. So those are interesting, very interesting example. The other one is we want to do, as marketers, we want to do some market research. So there's all kinds of ways that we can use ChatGPT for that. So now again, in my prompt, I'm giving it what is the role that ChatGPT should use. So I'm a marketer for the Quebec City Tourism Association. Give me 5 very different underlying needs related to tourism categories, and give each one a catchy name and explain it in simple terms. So now I have different profiles or personas of tourists that could be interested. And I asked for 5, I could ask for 10, 20, I could regenerate the response and have other explanation, other example. So again, in the prompt, and that's why I was saying there's no 42 magic prompt for everything. You provide the structure of what you want, you give it the instructions, who it should be, what it should do, what is the output, and what are there any constraints. So if you start with that, it's going to be pretty useful. So now, still in the idea of doing market research for a tourism association, I say, oh, you're an expert in British, French, Italian audiences, and you've done a lot of research, and give me what those audiences might want to look at. And so it gives me, for British audience, leisure, travel, culture, and so on. For French, it gives me something else. Here, the caveat is, and I voluntarily used a very simple example that is not too controversial, but you can have bias and bias that is introduced. So French are like this, and people from Italy are like that, and so on. So that's an example where we need to be careful in the way we use and understand this data. I use that as a very simple example of, all the French are like this, and all the English, the people from Britain or Great Britain are like this. And you see that for the British audience, it talks about food and drinks, but for French, it talks about gastronomy, which is kind of higher class. And for Italy, maybe it talks about it talks more about an experience. So those are things that we need to watch for in bias in the answer. Now, what about KPIs? Here, what I'm doing is I'm referring to someone who wrote a lot of books about KPIs, so David Parmenter. So in his books, he suggests a number of attributes when you define a KPI. What are the things that you should think about? A good name, description, who's the sponsor, is there any calculation, what are the control limits, and things like that. So I'm asking, based on what David Parmenter has written, I want to get a table, and here I'm giving it some training information. I know the result needs to have a good name, a sponsor, a description. So I'm giving it some indication of what to look for in David Parmenter's book. And now I'm saying, okay, make sure to include all the information, but even if you don't know, put something that would be an example or something plausible. And now for KPIs for a tourism association website, based on that, it gives me a table with 3 KPIs, the traffic, the user engagement, and the lead generation, which are essentially what this, it's a client of mine, so that's essentially what they are looking at. They don't sell anything online or whatever, so that's pretty much what they are looking at. And you see I have a complete table of attributes. It's a good starting point. Is it going to be perfect? Certainly not, but it's a quick way to start. So back to the research I showed you about the time spent to create the draft version. I got the draft in a few seconds. Now I can start from that and improve it. Very simple one, because I have access to the web browsing plugin. So initially ChatGPT, the training stops at a certain time and it doesn't have access directly to the internet. So it stopped in 2021. But now with the access directly to the internet, I can tell something like, okay, look at the marketing tags found on a website, and it gives me what are found on that web page. It's a quick, very quick, I didn't specify for which audience, what level of details and what things like that, but it actually gives me the right answer. That's really what's on that website. So again, that's another way of doing not market research, but for example, doing an audit. Speaking of audit, that's one that I like very much. Now I'm telling it, you're a marketer and you're an expert in marketing and analytics. You understand the privacy concepts and the GDPR. And now I'm giving it additional information. Do not self-reference, do not explain what you're doing, because sometimes it will do a lot of, provide a lot of text about the explanation of what it's doing. And do not make up anything. Do not hallucinate. That's the we talk about hallucination when it will make up an answer, even if it doesn't know really. It will make up something, because what we need to remember is it's not an encyclopedia, it's not a dictionary, it doesn't hold the truth about everything. It's a tool for creativity, it's a tool for feeding our brain, and it's up to us to make sense of it. It's up to us to use our expertise, our experience, our critical judgment to say, does it make sense? So now what I'm saying is, according to the GDPR, so the according to is very important. According to the GDPR, review the privacy policy at a given address and highlight any privacy risks. So it gives a summary of the privacy policy. So it's a great way when you have 45 pages of privacy policy, at least you can simplify that. And so it gives me a brief overview. Now what I tried to do is to say, okay, now that you know more about the context, I want you to turn that privacy policy into something that would be closer to privacy labels from Apple. And the first time I tried that, it said, well, I cannot do that because it's not the same thing. And to which I can reply, I know it's not the same, but do your best. And now what I have is a different type of summary where I have the data type and some details about whether it's mentioned explicitly in the document or not. So for example, that website doesn't collect any health data, so it's not mentioned in the policy. And so on and so on. So again, it's iterations that will allow us to move forward into our thinking about what really is going on. So I'm going to just go back to the presentation, and now we can just continue with that. Okay. So what we need to remember is that ChatGPT is really like our brother-in-law that thinks he knows everything, and you listen to him and it's like, okay, yeah, he sounds very intelligent, but we have to check everything he says. He's gonna have an answer for everything. So that's really how I see it. I've seen numerous articles online saying, oh, ChatGPT isn't good because it cannot do this and that. And all the time, it's because people are trying to use it as an encyclopedia and as a source of ultimate truth, which is never the right way to use it. So in terms of advancements, where it's going, one of the things that I've seen that I thought was interesting is using a JSON format to create a prompt. So I showed you a prompt that you can reuse. Ask me 2 questions. What is the topic for which audience? But you can create more complex JSON format with the specifications of what you want to do. So this one is pretty interesting because it will ask you to what is for teaching, what is the grade that you want to teach at? What is the communication style? Is it really informative, or is it more direct and stuff like that? And of course, what are the topic and so on? What length you want to the output to be? And it's used for in academia, so you can also create a course outline, create the topics for each of the modules, even create the questions, the exercise questions and stuff like that. So I think we'll see other ways in which this is going to be used. Another interesting thing that is that I've seen is we know that when we ask something, maybe the answer is not always perfect. So by using let's say two ChatGPT windows, you ask the same question and then you tell the other, so they will give you two different answers. You tell the other, oh, I asked the same thing to the other one, you need to find an agreement. So after 3 rounds, typically the answer is going to be, they will agree on an answer. So we see an example here, second round for a chess move, which one is the best? And one said something, the other one said something else, and then they will eventually agree. So there are techniques that we can use to, we see they came to the same conclusion. So there are techniques to improve the results. So the big question, is it good for data analysts? So here's just a table. The paper itself is much more interesting. There's a lot more information. So simulating a senior data analyst, 2 different senior data analysts. I think the profile was one had 7 years of experience, something like that, and a junior analyst. Different samples. So the tasks were all related to look at the data and analyze it and give me a visual. So in terms of analysis, we see for the senior analyst with 10 tasks, both of them had the right answer. In some cases, the chart, the visual that was selected was a little bit better when it was a senior data analyst selecting the visual. But we see that the end result in terms of the look of the quality of the visual, they got the same score. The difference is with ChatGPT, it took only 49 seconds, while for the senior analyst, it took much more. So that was for the chart itself. And then for the analysis, the correctness, the complexity, you see that for ChatGPT was able to provide more in-depth explanation about what was going on. And again, the time was really, really short. So in one of the studies that I've seen, the result is pretty much that someone who's more junior, so we see that for a junior analyst, the quality of the output sometimes will be better for ChatGPT, especially in terms of data analysis. We see that the scores are much higher, and it took less time. So those who have a lot of experience will gain less in terms of incremental quality than those who are more junior, who have less experience. They will gain more. So basically, it elevates the playing field for everyone. So the average of quality should be increasing. What we see is, of course, a lot of people posting on LinkedIn and so on, doing shortcuts, producing more content of average quality. The goal should be to produce the same amount of content as before, but with higher quality. So a website that is pretty good for keeping abreast of all the tools that are coming up. There's like there's AI washing basically. So all the tools that come out, they all claim to be AI and so on. So this tool is, this website is pretty good at classifying the different types of tools. So I showed you ChatGPT. It's mostly text content, but if you want to create videos, audio, any kind of content, you will see that there's a tool for that. There's an app for that. So lots of interesting tools. Not all of them are really good, so you have to. I would recommend starting with ChatGPT because that's kind of the foundation, that's the basic starting point, and then find more specialized tools as you go in and based on your needs. So one of the things I did is I asked in marketing. Oftentimes you probably heard that, you do a focus group and you ask the people, oh, if you were a car, would you be a BMW or a Hummer? And depending on what the answer, it means, oh, they are more like this and like that. So I asked ChatGPT, if you had to represent yourself as an image, what would be the image and what would be the attributes of the image? Actually, the explanation it gave me was much, much longer than that, explaining why there's neurons and connections, why there's text and languages, conversion bubbles, and so on. And then I took those indication and brought them into Midjourney, which is for creating images, and that's the image it created. So I thought it was very interesting to ask ChatGPT, how does it see itself? You will see, of course, you will have access to the presentation, and there's other examples, also bonus material that you can look at. So here's a cheat sheet. As I said, there's no 42 magic prompts for answering everything. Provide context, specify the training information, what is the output you want, what it needs to do, and then establish the rules and constraints if there's any. So those are the basic structure of a prompt. If you don't have to provide all the elements, but the more you provide, and don't be afraid to create larger prompt instead of simple one statement. You can provide a lot of context and a lot of information about it. The beauty also, what makes ChatGPT so exceptional is that it remembers the context. So if you start a question, a thread in ChatGPT, it will remember the context of what you're talking about. So if you start by asking questions about KPIs and metrics and stuff like that, when you continue to ask questions, it knows that it was about this website and it was about analytics and so on. So just a caveat, when you start with a very different topic, create a new thread in ChatGPT so that it starts from scratch, and you can keep the history of your conversation. So don't be afraid of iterating with your questions, asking precisions, asking additional information, asking some details, and so on. Avoid leading questions because it will answer what you want it to answer. You can ask for explanation, more detailed explanation, and of course, always validate the information, the output. I think what will make the difference is, especially in our field, is people who are able to who understand the basic concepts of marketing, of analytics, of business management, and so on, or the vertical industry for which you're doing analytics. Those are going to be the winners. If you just ask basic information, basic questions, you will get basic and average answers. So in summary, it's just another tool. We learned to use Google search. It's funny because just because I accepted to use ChatGPT in my classes, I got in the on the media and on radio, TV, and the press, as if it was exceptional. But I'm teaching marketing. I'm teaching something where creativity is so important. So yeah, it makes sense to use ChatGPT, but understand what are the constraints and the limits of it. So it's better to integrate it gradually into your practice and just be aware of the caveats, the limitations, the privacy risk implications. Also, don't give it any personal information. Now there's an option to turn it off, but by default, ChatGPT will use your prompt and the results to continue to train itself. So if you provide it with confidential information about your company, that's not a good idea. And Samsung, employees at Samsung actually did that. They shared with ChatGPT some internal documents. And what was found afterward is that you could ask questions specifically about Samsung, for example, and it would provide you an answer that included confidential information from the company. So that's something you should avoid. So just go ahead, try it, and you will see how powerful it is, how creative you can be with that. Find ways in your daily practice to integrate it. I keep it, as I mentioned, I keep a tab open on ChatGPT, and oftentimes even instead of looking on Google, sometimes there's questions that it's hard to find an answer when you search on Google. So I turn to ChatGPT, I ask my question, it will give me an answer, and then that's the starting point. If it says such and such person said something, then I can go back in Google and search for that person and what actually was it true that he said that. So it's a complementary tool. It will not replace your expertise, your judgment, your professional rigor and expertise. But I think, again, the winners are going to be those who can really apply that in the context of their work. So getting close to the end now, we're going to go into Q&A. I see, let's just stop that. I will simply go into stop the sharing and maybe. All right. So if there are any questions, I think we have a few minutes to answer those questions, and maybe there's a few in the chat. I'm moving my windows around. Okay. Yeah, okay.
Stephane, I'm just thanks for that. That's really informative. I'm just reading through the questions. So if attendees can use the Q&A feature, it's just slightly easier to find questions within that. So Thomas has asked, what are the plugins you've enabled for the ChatGPT session, i.e. he sees the icons in the top prompt in the window?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. When you go into your setups and do your configuration, you can select the plugins that you want. By default, in terms of beta features, the one that I have access to is browse with Bing. And otherwise, I can add additional plugins. But there's going to be more official ones from ChatGPT, like the code inspector is going to be very, very powerful. So otherwise, when the plugins that I use most often, Wolfram Alpha is one that I use. I use a lot of, there's one called Ask Your PDF, which is interesting. You can give it a PDF file and ask questions about the content. Show Me is interesting because it can create graphs and visuals and stuff like that. And then Link Reader. Link Reader is you can use the browser plugin directly from ChatGPT, but Link Reader is another way. Sometimes it works better than the one from ChatGPT. So Link Reader will let you provide a link and it will go and fetch the information. Those are the ones that I use most often. But when you look at the plugin store, there's just a ton of them. It's crazy how many new plugins are being created. So again, just go there, try it, and you will find the ones that are the most useful.
Great. Yeah, and we've got another question here. So, do you think we need to inform clients that we're using ChatGPT when working on their tasks?
That's a great question, because for my if I start from the academia side of things, for my students, what I told them is I want you to use it. I want you to discover the possibilities, but you need to mention at the end of your work or at the end of the document, you need to mention that you use ChatGPT for which purpose? Was it just for correction and improvement, or was it something else? And ideally, what is the prompt that you used? Because I want to know when they are using it. So as I think as professionals, I think it would be interesting if we were transparent about it and just mention that, for example, for my presentation, the first slide, I had something kind of funny that said, yes, AI was used in this presentation, but no humans or animals were harmed in the process. So just something funny, but yeah, I think, but again, it's like, will you say that you use Google in search for part of your work? You don't have to disclose that. So I guess if it's the whole, if you create the whole output and you give and you say, hey, I did that, it was wonderful, that's not being honest. But if you used it for market research, for generating part of the content, yes, then that's great.
Yeah. And another question here we've got, which is, how can you use it with proprietary information from your company? This is similar to the Samson example, for things such as analytics data or summarized long documents.
Yeah, exactly. Sam Altman, who's the CEO of OpenAI, said that it's unlikely there will be a GPT 4.5 or version 5, because what he said is we've reached the limits of what we can do for now. But ChatGPT is kind of the public access general information. What we already see happening is using the same technology, you can train on your own specific data set or information. So we can imagine a version of ChatGPT that would be trained, for example, on regulations in Europe. So GDPR, e-privacy, and plus all the cases and stuff like that. So it would create a version that would be much more specialized for vertical application. So you can do that for your own business also. You can use the same technology, but train it with your own internal documents and keep it within the realm of your own organization using the API and stuff like that. So that's what we're going to see. Imagine like a call center or a chatbot that would be specifically trained on your own knowledge base. That's going to be much better than the chatbots that we see today.
Yeah, and I wonder if maybe like they'll have a way of digesting maybe email data or how people write emails to almost.
That's the thing, is whether you want it or not, generative AI is going to be in everything that we do, because Google, Microsoft, Adobe are integrating elements of generative AI in all the tools. So being able to, for example, write a document based on a few prompts. The thing I wonder is, okay, we're going to end up with a document that was created by generative AI, and on the other end, the person reading it is going to use AI to simplify the summary of the document. So are we going to end up wasting our time?
Yeah, there's a question from Matt here. He's asked, I think this is related to Italy. He said, is ChatGPT GDPR compliant?
I'm not a lawyer, so I won't. What I can say is that ChatGPT was trained on publicly available information on the internet. The problem is, because it should be used for creativity. If you ask it, tell me about Stephane Hamel, for example, it might say that I'm dead, because it's making up. It's just taking information from all the sources and creating something that is plausible, that sounds real, but again, don't use it for as an encyclopedia or the source of ultimate truth. So a lot of people are raising, the alarm, saying, "Oh, it's not GDPR compliant because it was trained on personal data, some personal data, and also that it might hallucinate and say things that aren't true about people." So again, my best recommendation is you try it, use it, but be aware of its constraints and its limits, because you might end up in trouble.
Yeah, great. I'm just conscious of time now. We've got like about 5 minutes left, so I'm just gonna take over speaker control, and can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, so if we weren't able to answer your question sort of in like real time, there is in parallel to the Zoom event, we've got the sort of networking lounge on Kubernetes. So if attendees visit bit.ly/GA4 questions, and it's the level 2 on the lounge where there's we say if the speakers can head there, within that level 2, Stephane, there's a little space with your picture on it. If you head there, people can ask you verbally. So people that raise their hands in this session, they can continue sort of chatting there. Also, please make sure you fill in the feedback form for Stephane. So Will, if you could just post that link into chat, that would be great. And if there are any updates to your slides, we can always kind of provide them sort of after. Obviously, it's a live event, so but we're glad that your ChatGPT thinks you're alive and well, so that's good. So as I said, Stephane, if you could head over into Kumo, just a note about Kumo. People have just been mentioning in chat, it doesn't, Zoom and Kumo don't sort of play together well, so you have to mute one or hide video on one so that the other one sort of works. But you can jump between the two. So Chris, I'm just going to hand over the baton to you for the videos.
Thank you, Phil.
Thank you again, Stephane.
I'm jumping into Kumo right now. See you.